Hi, I'm Troy Hubble from YourDyslexiaExpert.com. You can see I'm wearing my nerdy Dungeons and Dragons shirt today. It says choose your weapon, and it's got all of the different dice that you might roll in a Dungeons and Dragons game. So it's my vibe today. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm making this video to talk about fluency. Fluency means accurate, rapid reading with appropriate expression. And it's one of the most misunderstood things about reading, and it's especially misunderstood, sometimes intentionally misunderstood, it seems, by people who don't think that we should follow the science in terms of how kids learn how to read. So, without further ado, let's talk more about fluency. This is one of the most famous graphics in all of reading science. If you are a nerdy person like me, you probably have seen it. This is Scarborough's rope. What Scarborough did is she created a graphic to show us all of the different strands, skills that we need in order to become skilled readers and how those skills intertwine to make skilled reading happen. Now, one criticism of science of reading movement is that we like to advocate a test called oral reading fluency. For oral reading fluency, we give you a test where we give you a story. We give you 1 minute to read as much of that story as you can. And then we measure you based upon your accuracy. What percent of the words did you read right? Did you read correctly? And based upon your rate, how quickly were you able to read those words? And if you don't understand what that test is or why it does what it does, a lot of times it can feel like we're teaching kids to speed read. That's not the case. Let me explain a little bit more. We know that oral language develops naturally. If you put a baby in a home where people are speaking any language in the world, it will naturally learn how to speak. It will start to mimic the adults around it. That is a natural process. Reading is very different. When we read, we actually have to retrain parts of our brain that are designed to do other things. And because of that, the comprehension part of reading is actually more natural and more likely to occur naturally than the sounding out words, the word recognition part of reading. So, when we give the test oral reading fluency, here's what we know. We know that most of the time, not all of the time, most of the time, when a student is having trouble understanding what they read, it isn't that they can't understand the text. When we read it to them, they do actually pretty well with comprehension. It's that they're working so hard to decode the words that there's not enough working memory, enough mental processing power left to comprehend the story. And we know that if students can read accurately and quickly, that they are very likely, 90% likely, according to some studies, to understand what they read. Now, there's a couple of caveats to this. If you have a student with slow processing speed, the rate part of this is not going to be that useful because they're going to read a little bit slower no matter what you do. And as long as they're reading accurately and automatically, that's fine. Equally too, there are a class of disabilities where students can absolutely read the words, but are not able to understand what they read. We refer to this as hyperlexia. You're able to decode far more than you can comprehend. And it's most common with students who have things like autism, but there's a number of things that can cause hyperlexia to happen as well. That being said, we know that most students who are able to read accurately and fluently are going to be able to comprehend what they read. It's the best predictor that we have found. That's why we give this particular test. But what we're actually looking for is automaticity. We know that if you are spending a lot of effort decoding the words, that you are not likely to have enough brain power left to do the comprehension. Or if you are, it's going to take you a lot longer and a lot more effort than you need to put into it. We can't measure how easy it is for you to read the words. I always tell my students, you don't have a window in your head. I can't see inside of your brain. But what we can do is we can look at indirect measures of how easy it is to read a word. We know that for the average kid, with average processing speed, all the way up through, usually these oral reading fluency measures are normed up through like the middle school years. We know how fast they should be able to read to have a really good likelihood of comprehension. We know that if they are skilled decoders, if they have efficient reading strategies, that this is about the speed and accuracy that they should be able to be at. And we know that if we improve for the vast majority of kids the rate at which they're able to read, we know that what we're really doing is improving how easy it is for them to access and sound out those words. And that when it's easy and effortless to sound out the words, you can spend your brain power on the really important stuff, the understanding. And so the understanding improves dramatically. So this is Scarborough's rope. Why did I bring this up? And where is fluency on this rope? Another misunderstanding that comes from this idea that science-based tests like the oral reading fluency tests promote speed reading is that what we're really trying to do is get kids to read faster. If you take a student who is not reading well and you teach them to read faster, what you will actually teach them to do is to make more mistakes, but do it faster. That's completely counter to what we want. Instead, what we want is we want to be able to teach them how to read words accurately, easily, and effortlessly. The parts of Scarborough's rope that play into that are these down here. Phonological awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate sounds. It's this phoneme level, the individual speech sound level, that's the most important. The coding is phonics. Can you connect the letters and groups of letters to the sounds that they represent? There's a little bit of morphology in there too. That's the prefixes, suffixes, etc. And then sight recognition. A lot of times when schools talk about sight words, notice the air quotations, they're talking about words that they don't think follow the spelling rules. In actuality, a lot of words that schools call sight words do follow the spelling rules. The schools just don't know the spelling rules, but that's a whole nother video. Anyways, when researchers talk about sight words, that isn't what they mean. The brain has two pathways for reading. On one pathway, we go from the letters to the sounds, we get kind of what I would call like a phonological representation. We have an idea of what the word sounds like. Then we connect that to our vocabulary to see if it's a word we know, and eventually get to the meaning. When we have read a word enough times, though, we don't have to go through that whole pathway. We can go directly from the word to the meaning. And this is actually represented by two different pathways in the brain. When researchers talk about sight words, what they're actually talking about is, has this student read the words in this text a sufficient number of times that these have become part of their sight word vocabulary, that they're no longer required to take the slow pathway through the brain, but can instead take the fast pathway through the brain. We know that in order to get something into the fast pathway to the brain, we have to use the slow pathway first. We have to be able to sound it out. Once we've done that enough times and we have enough pattern recognition and enough experience with decoding, then we can start moving words into the fast pathway at a pretty rapid rate because we start recognizing those spelling patterns and those little clues about language of origin and things like that that make reading so much easier. So these are what we're actually trying to measure, along with a little bit of vocabulary, when we give an oral reading fluency test. So where's fluency on this rope? I don't see it on there. It's here. When we are automatic with our phonemic awareness skills and our decoding skills, when we have a large sight word vocabulary, and we can then integrate our comprehension skills because we've gotten good enough at decoding to free up our working memory, all of a sudden, words become easier. In fact, if you are a skilled reader, or if you're not, if you talk to anyone you know who's a skilled reader, ask them if they can look at this page and not read the words. I can't do it. My brain will read these words automatically. I can't stop it. I can't turn them back into random letters for me. That's skilled reading. That's what we want. That's what the fluency test is trying to measure. When we can make word reading automatic, such that your brain cannot help but read the words, we know that we have taught you skilled reading. What fluency really is exactly that process. We are trying to measure whether they can look at words and have those words spring out of the page into their head as meanings. When kids can do that, when adults can do that, when people can do that, they have accomplished skilled reading. That is really what fluency is. So remember, fluency is how fast you read, how accurately you read, and whether you can read with expression. But the reason that it's important is because it gives us a way to try to measure how automatic your reading is. When it's automatic, you can go slow, you can go fast, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be able to understand what you read. And that is the goal of all reading instruction. As always, if you know someone who's struggling with reading, please refer them to my website. I'm happy to help. And similarly, if you want more information about any of the things that I've shared today, if you want me to make a video about any other facet of reading or dyslexia or something that confuses you, just let me know. I'm happy to do it. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye.